All right, so we did all the meticulous pre-planning on our shoot, and then we executed that shoot flawlessly through everything that we've learned in this series. And then now we have our footage and we've brought it onto our computer. Now you can see that we have the different folders that are holding the different takes, some A-roll footage, some behind the scenes footage. And basically what we're gonna do is take all of these video files that we've captured on our camera and we've dragged it into a video folder on the computer itself. And now what we're gonna do next is create a Premiere project file for our actual video. So we're going to title our project. This is called, let's say, Udemy Music Video Example. And now what we want to do is go into the correct folder for that, Udemy Music Video Example. Boom. So now all of the saved files, all of the rendering files, all the files that your editing software is going to use is going to be stored and saved in that specific folder. Always a good idea to keep everything as organized as possible. The more complex your projects will get, the more disorganized they'll naturally want to become. So we have to start everything somewhat structured and organized. So we're going to create that folder, open up our Premiere file, and now our next step is to drag our footage from the shoot into our editing software project. Okay, perfect. So now as you can see, we have our footage from our shoot on all the different cards that it was shot on. So we've captured everything into our editing software neatly, and everything is already labeled with which card it was shot on. Now it's time to actually create a sequence in the editing software so that we can pull selects, aka the good shots that we're going to be using hopefully in the final product of the video itself. So we're going to go to the first card that we shot on, highlight all of these files, right click, new sequence from clip. In any editing software that you're using, when you do that, it's just going to say that you want the software to create a sequence at the same settings that these shots were created at. The same format, the same frame rate, the same aspect ratio. So this is kind of the quickest way to drop your footage that you want to into a sequence that has the proper settings. This is the very first opening shot of the video itself. We have this very mysterious and misty hallway, and our two main characters are introduced in this very first shot. And so what we're going to be doing here is pulling these selects. And now there are two separate ways you can go about doing this. So the first way, and probably the most efficient way to pull your selects, is to drag all of your video files into the timeline. And what you're going to be doing is working through these video files in a linear process from beginning to end. So for this very first opening shot, I'm going to scrub forward until right before our subjects come into frame. Let's say right about there. Delete what's in front of that. Let it play. And then I'm going to cut it right after they grab hands. And let's say I want to get them opening this door. And perfect. So here's the reverse shot, shooting the same exact scene from the opposite angle. Now, I don't necessarily like the lighting too much, or the way this looks. You can see it's a very low angle, so they look very heroic, but that's not necessarily the vibe that I'm looking for with this opening sequence. So I'm going to skip ahead here, and I'm going to find the shot where our two main subjects come through the door that they opened. So let's say right when they're coming into frame right here. Perfect. And so you get the point. You have an idea of what you shot, and what you're going to be doing is moving through your sequence, pulling the best shots that are going to create that final 3-minute video. You're going to end up with what we have here is about 45 minutes of footage that we had shot, but to fit all the best shots into that really refined and well edited video, you need to whittle down the shots that you don't need, because for every 10 shots that you make or create, you're probably going to only end up using one of those shots. So the very first step is pulling these selects. The next way to pull selects is to physically label them in the viewer panel or the project panel of your editing software. So we can do the same exact thing in a different way, where we double click the clip so that it's playing in this preview window, and we go ahead and we scrub forward, and then we say, okay, I'm going to create an in point where the subjects come into frame, and then I'm going to create an out point after they grab hands. And so now what I can do is label that file, let's say opening shot, and then you can get really as detailed as you'd like, hyphen, characters, hands. And so now when we start cutting together, instead of having that as an unlabeled shot in your timeline, it'll be a labeled shot in this project viewer panel. It's really up to you what kind of way you want to go about it. Obviously, the secondary option is a lot slower. This first option is what I use the most. I know that there have been certain projects where I didn't necessarily know what was going to go where and wanted to have everything labeled so that depending on the specific shot that I felt was needed for where I was at in the sequence, I could find it very easily by knowing it through the label that I had created for it. And so now I have all of my main selects pulled. As you can see in this sequence, we have this opening shot that we went through, and then we have another character, some more close-ups, what we would call B-roll, the detail that's surrounding the character or the location. Close-ups of another character. As you can see, I label them with different colors. Personally, I like doing this. It's very easy to decipher between separate colors so that you know, okay, this color is one character, this color is another character. So you can see that we pulled all of our selects for each individual scene and each individual scene that the character is in. So the next step, now that we've done an amazing job pulling our selects, is going to be creating our first rough edit. Now, the editing process is definitely a very step-by-step method where you don't go from capturing the footage that you shot to this amazing final product. No, it doesn't work that way with editing. You capture the footage, pull the select so that you know what you're going to use, and then you create a rough edit. So with the rough edit, what we want to do is get the overall structure or skeleton or the basis of what the edit will look like when it's finalized. So basically what that means is queuing up certain very important points in your scene or in your video and having them be in the right order at the very minimum, but not necessarily having all the ins and out points set perfectly yet, because we just want to get, like I said, that overall structure so that we can refine it more and more. And one really good way to use this rough editing phase is before you go and you spend hours and hours and hours tightly editing these small scenes, is to use the rough edit to be seen by possibly your friends, other people involved in the project, possibly the client that you're making the video for, so that they can see what the overall structure is and you can get feedback on what's working and what's maybe not working before spending a lot of time in the refining phase. So let's create a rough edit and see what it looks like. So we have our footage, we have all of our selects pulled in the timeline, and now it's time to drop in the soundtrack. Let's take a listen to what we have and maybe add some markers to important parts of the track. Kind of a cool intro. I just added a marker at that point. Another marker right there. Something that I always do is add these markers so that when I'm looking at the actual song itself with the waveforms, I can see where the important moments are in the track. Because like we have been understanding, what we want to do is marry those important moments in the video with the most important moments in the audio. So with that said, let's go ahead and drag in our song. As you can see, this is a 3-minute song, 3.5-minute song, and you can see how many selects that we actually have. Now let's go ahead and move to our BTS sequence where I already pulled selects. As you can see, some really cool behind the scenes shots of the very beginning of the day. So I know that for this specific video, I'm gonna wanna put all the selects I pulled at the beginning of the day towards the beginning of the video so that the viewer kind of has the sense that they're a part of the entire production. So let's see what that looks like. So you get a feel for the overall vibe of what we're looking to create here. This is when you get to show your client or other people involved in the project what the vibe and what the look is so far, the overall aesthetic, and then you can go in for another round once you get their feedback, or once you really step away from the project yourself, create a little bit of space from the editing itself, and maybe take a day off, maybe take 2 days off, come back and look at your own rough edit so that you can see what's working and what's not working. So now let's take a look at our secondary edit. It's a much more higher frequency of cuts, right? Our first rough edit is kind of like shot, 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 showing the chronological order of what's going to go where. Now on the secondary edit, it's a lot more refined. There's a lot higher frequency of shots so that we know that there's a lot more action and a lot more of an interesting, refined look that's happening. And forgive me for having to play this footage back at half resolution. This is red cam footage that we're working with here, so we can't be playing everything at full resolution or my computer would probably implode. So let's check it out. You know?
Let's reset.
So as you can see, the difference between the progress between The rough edit and the secondary edit is huge. So for you guys working on whatever project that you have, and then seeing other people's work that's out there and that, you know, maybe looks amazing to you, or that it's not doable for you to get to that point, just know that they didn't go from putting that camera footage into their computer and then suddenly having this amazing video. They started the same way that we're starting. They started with pulling the selects, making a rough edit that wasn't necessarily ready to be viewed by you know, your actual audience yet, but ready to be re-edited and worked on and refined. And then we get to the secondary edit. And then after that, we get to the refining process. But overall, these edits can go on for as long as you need. I've had projects where it says so-and-so export -11, -12, -13, -13.1, -13.2. It's going to take a definite work on your end in the post-production process to really refine and get that awesome final product. And so for this refining process, once we go through however many re-edits that we need, whether that's 3 re-edits or 23 re-edits, it's really up to you and it's up to the project that you're working on. But once we basically have our picture locked down, which means this shot's going to go here and nowhere else, this shot's going to go here and nowhere else, the timing for everything is perfect, nothing needs to be physically reordered or moved around. Now what we do is go into the color correction phase, where we color grade, or where we color correct and then color grade all of our footage, and we add any kind of media assets that we need, any other elements that layer on top of the footage, motion graphics, title cards, which we will get into. But next up, before we get into those portions of the final refining process, let's first go over the theories and principles that will allow you to know what to cut, when to cut, and to get to those final steps of the editing process. Now, the first of the main elements when it comes to cutting is the shot choice. Just like in cinematography, you can have one specific scene, but the way that you choose to shoot that scene, right? The way you choose to shoot something is you're gathering information in that scene with that specific framing and angle. In post-production, when you shoot that, now you have these choices of what kind of camera angles to use, right? So we have a wide shot, a medium shot, an over the shoulder, close up, and extreme close up. So we have all this different information of importance, of what to look at, simply all from the same exact scene. So we really have a lot to work with here in this scenario as an editor, saying, okay, what do I want to show to my audience at this point in my video? Do I want to show the viewer, or do I want to show the viewers my character in their environment? Or do I want to keep things a little bit more mysterious and only use close-up shots to show the importance of what the character is looking at, what the character is holding, what the character is feeling? Or do I want to show wide shots and show the audience the environment that the character is actually in this situation? So really, with shot choice, what you're doing is deciding at that moment in time what is important for your viewer to see. You already did your job in production, shooting the different camera angles that were necessary, and now in post-production, you have all these different ingredients to choose from that exemplify or that create the feeling or those moments that you want to in your film at that specific time. Now the next thing up is shot ordering, right? It's just as important as shot choice. The way that you order your shots are the way that you're going to affect the viewer sequentially. So in this scenario with this video, I'm going to be actually jumping around between different videos for you guys. so I can best express these kind of concepts and principles. But in this example, we have this character mixed with another character, but there's specific key elements that are similar in these different shots. You can see that I'm showing the characters holding their own individual, in this case, a weapon. And their clothing. So I'm choosing to show the clothing of the different individuals. So putting all these elements in a specific order allows for the viewer to connect what's going on. By choosing your shots in post-production, you're telling your viewer, okay, this subject or this object has significance, and this helps to tell your story. The interesting thing is that the stories aren't really being told on the screen. It's all happening in the viewer. They're sitting there, they're viewing your images that are being played one after the other on the screen, and they're subconsciously analyzing and making sense of what they're seeing. So the images have a certain relationship with one another, and this example is called the Kouchlov effect. So you can take images that don't necessarily have a connection with each other, but once organized together in post-production, you can create something that wasn't there originally. This footage is from an original experiment done by Lev Kuleshov himself. He took footage of a man staring into the camera and put different clips in front of it, showed them to the audience, and the audience went absolutely crazy saying how wonderful an actor he was, how he portrayed his role so well, when in reality, it's the same shots played over and over again with different images in front. So what's really going on is how the viewer's perceiving what's on the screen. That's where the story takes place. Basically, if you have certain shots grouped together, you can say that all those shots are in a specific family. And then if you have a certain other shots grouped together, all those shots are in a different family. So with that said, in this example, by choosing to order the shots of these characters' faces together, you're automatically creating a certain connection, right, between these different frames. So let's take a look. So you see where I'm going with this is that by ordering these faces together, you're able to create so much more of an emotional reaction from the audience. Now let's say if I took the same exact sequence and changed the ordering a little bit, we get a drastically different effect. It's not nearly as impactful because we simply change the ordering of what's happening in between these very powerful shots. So it's not just a matter of getting very cinematic, a very cinematic production and nailing your lighting and nailing your cinematography. It's also how you are choosing these shots and how you are ordering these shots. Now that leads us to getting specifically your shot length, which is extremely important.